Well, let's talk a little about Days of Future Past. How faithful is the movie to the John Byrne, Chris Claremont comics from the 80s?
I still would have to say it's inspired by it. Obviously, in that story, Kitty Pryde, the Traveler here, Wolverine. But it's the essence of it's the story of something's wrong in the future and how can we change it. And there are characters, they're familiar characters. Some that made it in this movie but didn't make it in the comic. And some the opposite, and then some new ones that we added. I mean, that book centers around a singular conflict battle. We've expanded where it takes place all over the world, and it's got a lot of different stuff going on in it. But it's very inspired and very much in keeping with the essence of that story. It's not the brightest, most happiest X-Men movie, but it has a bright intention, and it's about trying to right wrongs and change and getting a second chance.
Time travel has always been a staple of science fiction. What are some of the pitfalls of working with a time travel subject?
Well, it was tough to crack. It took me a little while to figure out what my rules of time travel are, and there are movies that especially a movie like Back to the Future, it really all takes place in the past, and your one grounding element is this photograph that keeps fading. So it's trying to find a device like that for a movie that has things happening in the past simultaneously with what's happening in the future. So I won't get into the specifics of it, but I sort of came up with a formula of how it would work, and I think and then I adhere to it. I stay true to it. So I pitched it to James Cameron. He thought it was a good idea. It worked. So.
Will the movie have some of the elements of the comics that were much loved, like the Sentinels?
Yeah,
okay.
Some robots and some. And which is fun about this X-Men movie. It's different than the other ones in the sense that it does deal with something unique, time travel, which there's precedent for in the comic, obviously with Days of Future Past and other storylines. And then there's technology, the idea of technology, which hasn't been explored yet.
Will we see the mutant internment camps and some of the anti-mutant hysteria in the comics?
You'll see a little of that. We'll see, but it takes place in the future, about give or take 10 years after X-Men 3 or Wolverine, and then it also takes place about exactly 10 years after X-Men First Class. In fact, most of the movie takes place in 1973. A lot of collars, big collars, flared pants, horrible colors.
Yeah, it seems like you raided a lot of the vintage shops here in Montreal.
Oh my God! You got to come to our costume department. Do we have enough? It's like the weirdest thrift store. But it's real memories for me because I was a kid in that period, and I forgot how ridiculous my father must have looked. So, Peter Dinklage looks like a smaller version of my father. He was very handsome at the time.
Was it a challenge juggling all the mutants in this film and all the actors' schedules?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of the actors are running picture, but then you have other actors like like Anna Paquin, who's on a series. Peter Dinklage, she's on True Blood. He's on Game of Thrones. Evan Peters is on American Horror Story. You have other Jennifer Lawrence is in Hunger Games. So you try. So it's been interesting shooting the movie with this kind of cast. But what's important, I believe, is they're not all thrown in there just to get a bunch of faces in there. They really all serve the story in a really, I think, a very beautiful way. And and it's been worth it, but it's been tough. Like there was one certain scheduling stuff we had to deal with at the beginning of the shoot where we were shooting from 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning, and then going back again. And then now we're doing the same thing up against a clock. I have to finish in a couple of weeks, just because But I'll be back. I'm doing well. I'm on schedule.
After sitting out the last two X-Men movies, does it feel good to be back in this universe?
Well, I produced X-Men First Class, and I wrote the story for it. So I was there through the casting process and the design, and I was on set a bit, and then I was there in the post process to give my thoughts and things. So I kind of eased back into it with that. But to be there as a director, I mean, it's just great. I mean, the actors are old friends of mine, and the new cast I'm familiar with and friendly with. Nick Holt I just made a movie with, Jennifer Lawrence, and I know through him because they were in a relationship, and so, you know, but the new guys I knew personally, but I hadn't really worked with, or that I didn't spend a lot of time with, were James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, and they're just fantastic. It's just a very cool experience. You were on set, he came on set, it was cool.
Coolest day of my life.
And then Wolverine, we were sitting there chatting.
Are some of the themes from the first two X-Men films still relevant in this film? In terms of the social acceptance, or has that been played out and now you're on to something else?
No, they're very much, because this film is very much the story of where X-Men First Class was the story of Xavier and Magneto and the beginning of their relationship. This movie is about them becoming who they have become or will become. And that's kind of interesting to see. You find the characters in very different places than you left them in X-Men First Class. So that's pretty cool. And also you find the X-Men, Patrick, Ian, Hugh, Halley, and all them in a very different place than they were left at the end of X-Men 3 or Wolverine.
Do you guys have some questions for Bryan Singer?
I see you. Do you have lights or something? Oh, no, because it's really dark. Oh, there you are.
Okay, cool. I've got this lady right here. Go ahead, spit it out.
Thank you very much for coming. I just had a question about dealing with actors and any sort of particular ways about them. I suppose, for example, if you have to work with Joaquin Phoenix, who's, he all of his skins and gladiator thing, all of his leather when he played Johnny Cash in Walk the Line. All the leather he played as Johnny Cash in Walk the Line was fake, and Joaquin Phoenix vegan, blah blah blah. And he narrated the movie Earthlings, which is pretty intense. So if you have an actor like that, and you're like, okay, how do I approach this person who's so set on something? Do you tell them, listen, that's nice, this is how it's going to be, or do you have to cooperate with them?
God, I'm friends with Joaquin, so that's weird to hear all that stuff. I always thought it'd be easy to just be like, yeah, dude, let's make a movie. No, the first thing I do is I listen to the actor, and when they have these ideas. Brian Cox on X-Men 2 came in and said, I'm doing a Southern accent. I'm like, can you do a Southern accent? It better be a good one then. Benicio del Toro said, he started doing that. And I was like, oh, okay. And I quickly had to go through my mind, does the audience need to understand anything this guy has to say? No, they don't. Okay, it's fine. So, it's true. I have 1 minute to make that decision, by the way. Because I thought it was a joke. I thought, he got drunk with Pete Postlethwaite and Chris McCoy that night, and they thought, I'm going to walk on set and watch Brian, freak out. But no, so what I do is I first listen to the actor, because clearly they've given it thought. They've managed their character. And with great actors like Joaquin Phoenix, you want to let them bring themselves to the table. It's like when I get hired, I'm a particularly great director, but when I get hired to make a film, I'm asking them to let me make my film because I'm the guy they hired. So if I've hired Brian Cox or Kevin Spacey or Benicio del Toro, any of these actors, because I trust them, the first thing I do is I listen and I try to let them do what they want to do, and I hope it's congruous with the movie. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And when it isn't, you just have to guide them, caring. You have to just listen. You have to show that you actually listen. And if they say this is how I'm doing it, then you gotta adapt quickly. I imagine. I've never had that happen before. I've never had an actor as an ultimatum saying, "This is what I'm doing," in a big way. Like where Marlon Brando wore a bucket on his head and said, "This is." Or no pants. It's like, okay. I asked Russell Crowe before I ever met Hugh Jackman. I asked Russell Crowe to play Wolverine, and he said, I'll do him bald. I was like, maybe. So that. Next thing. Thank you, question.
Thank you very much for coming to Montreal with this huge production, by the way.
Thank you. Where are you? So I can see you. There. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm very curious, what sort of things go into a decision to come to Montreal as opposed to Toronto or Vancouver, which are even larger in terms of productions? And on the flip side, what is it that Montreal has as an advantage versus those other two cities? And what is it that we could do better to bring more large productions here?
Great bars. So much fun. No, yes, but also, well, there are tax incentives, which they don't, foolishly in California, they're not offered, and there are good tax incentives. In the case, I can only answer specifically to this film. There was stage space. White House Dan was leaving, so I could take over. I could get the best crew available here. There's a great facility at Mel's. It's an amazing facility because everything's right, all in one space. So there's the economic incentive. There's the location. I love shooting here particularly because the set is. The stages are so close to the city. Where when I was shooting in Berlin and in London, it was a trek. It was an hour drive each way. That takes a toll on you and the cast and everyone and crew. And again, for this film, for Days of Future Past, since it takes place all over the world, when I'm shooting out in the street, there's terrific locations here that can double for Paris or Russia or things like that. So it was really, right for this movie. But I personally, I have to live in a place for a year of my life, and I sort of now in my career have the ability to make those choices. And I really wanted to live here. I prepped a movie called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind here that I ultimately did not make, but I prepped it here. And but my cinematographer went on to shoot with George Clooney directing, but when I prepped it here, I really loved it. The 2 months I spent here, and I thought, and I had just shot Jack the Giant Slayer in London, and I loved living in London. So when they told me, we're not going to go to London, London's too full, it's too packed with movies, I was like, uh-oh. And then they said Montreal, and I went, oh, cool. And it's been cool, it's been great. So, that's the reason.
I guess another thank you is in order, and my question has more to do with Xavier's and Magneto's relationship later on in this movie. You see them in X-Men 1 and X-Men 2, they have a very unique relationship, as in they stand for the same cause, but they take different sides to it, and yet they still consider each other very, very close friends. You see them become close friends in X-Men First Class, but how are you going to really get into this relationship with the newer movie?
Well, I just repeat sort of what I said before. In this movie, you're going to see where in X-Men First Class, it was how they met. This is how they became or become true. Well, I can't give it away because something happens in it with regard to their lovely relationship. But it's just you'll see. It's more about them as characters and solidifying or getting to who they need to become than it is so much about their relationship. Although their relationship is part of the film. That's all I can tell you without telling you the scene I'm shooting Tuesday. I mean tomorrow. No, it's actually Thursday. I'm freaking out about it.
Hello, Mr. Singer.
Hello.
First of all, thank you for coming to Montreal. Thank you for this opportunity. My question has to do with your course of going to that career. You went to film school, you went to the more conventional route, while someone like Quentin Tarantino, he never went to film school and he still made it big. What do you think, is the pros and cons of following each way of getting into filmmaking, basically?
For me, the greatest part about film school for me was I saw a lot of great movies that I may not have seen on my own, where Quentin worked in a video store, I think, so he was, educating himself with movies. And I met some collaborators. The most important one is John Ottman, who's my editor and my composer. And he's not necessarily worked on every single thing I've done, but he's worked on most of it. And that was a great relationship that began at USC Film School. So, when I went to School of Visual Arts, the first 2 years of my career, my academic life, I lived in New York City, and I was learning more about the art film scene and things like that. So I felt I got well-rounded exposure that way. And as a kid living in suburbia, that was the best way for me to do it. But I had the opportunity, you know, with Quentin, he's just absorbed himself into film on his own, and then did what you got to do, and that's just make films. It's really more about making films than when you go to film school or don't. It's making films is the most important thing. It's 80% of it.